When it comes time to start building your document set, you'll want to set up some sheets and you'll want to place some views on those sheets. And of course, you're going to want to be able to coordinate those views on the various sheets so that your recipients can easily find views that are referenced in one sheet to where they're located in another. Common examples of this are elevations, sections, callouts, where you want to indicate where those views are referenced. So we've got some examples here in this floor plan. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so you can see. So over here on the left, you can see section 1 on A301. That's a referenced view tag. Up here at the top, we have section 2 on A301. That's another example of a referenced view tag. And then over here at the right, I have two examples of non-referenced view tags here and here. So these two are not yet placed on sheets. And so it's really that easy to tell which ones are which. Now, another way that you can tell is to look at Project Browser. So if I scroll down here on the Project Browser, we've got these little indicators next to each view. The ones with the blue badge are on sheets already. The ones where the badge is not colored are not yet on sheets. So if we scroll down to the sections branch right here, sections building section, you can see that the longitudinal section and the transverse section are both colored in blue. Those are the two that I just indicated to you, detail 1 and 2 on sheet A301. So those badges, by the way, are optional. If you want, you can right-click and uncheck the show placement on sheet status icons, but I personally think it's much nicer to have those visible, so I suggest leaving those on, but it is your preference if you want to turn them off. Let me scroll down now on the browser and locate the Sheets branch here. And then both of these sections that we talked about are on A301. So here is sheet A301. And if you expand the plus sign next to that, notice you can see any views that are placed on that sheet indented beneath. So here's our longitudinal section and here's our transverse section. And then of course you can just double click sheet A301 to open it up and have a look at it that way. Not only do those cross references appear in the floor plan, but if you zoom in here on the section, notice that these two views reference each other. So in the longitudinal section, we've got a reference to the transverse right there, 2 on A301. And then likewise, in the transverse section, we've got another reference back to the longitudinal because these two sections cross one another. So all of that is happening automatically for us simply by creating these views. Revit takes care of all of this. Now, I appear to have plenty of room on this sheet. So let's see what happens when we add a new view. So I'm going to scroll up to the sections branch and let's take the section at stair, start dragging that out of browser, and you'll see a little plus sign here, let go. And now you're going to see a rectangle representing the size of that view. And you can click to place this anywhere that you want on the sheet. Now, if you move nearby another title bar, the title bars will try to line up with one another. But what I think is better than that is if you move nearby a similarly cut view, like another section, it will try to line up the model geometry instead. So I think that's nicer in this case. So I'm going to line up with the model geometry and click. And then if we zoom in and you compare the heights of the levels, you can see that all the levels align with one another across the view. Now notice that this view got assigned to number 3 because that was the next available number on this sheet. And any other view that references this detail now will show that reference, including the transverse section right here. You can see that it's already filled in as detail number 3 on A301. If I go back to the floor plan, you can see that it's now referenced right there as well. That all takes care of itself. You don't have to do anything more than simply placing the view on the sheet and let Revit handle the work of keeping all the cross references intact. So I'm going to click back to this sheet and let's talk about the numbering now. So this is detail 1, then 2, then 3. What if I wanted it to go 1, then 2, then 3? I can easily renumber the views by simply selecting it and then looking over at the properties palette. The detail number will be listed right here. Now, you could put in any other number you want, but you can't reuse an existing number. So if I try to use number 2, it says that number's already in use. So the workaround is a little silly, but take this one change it temporarily to something that's not being used, like number 4, that frees up number 2. I come back and select it here and make that one number 2 now without warning. And then I can take this one and change it to 3. And now I've renumbered all of those to my desired order, and all of the references will take care of themselves. So now notice the section is number 2 here, and it's number 2 here as well. And the transverse is now number 3. So you can make those changes with full confidence without worrying that it's going to be missed somewhere like it would back in the days when we had to do these things by hand. Okay. So I really can't say enough about cross-referencing in Revit. It just works. It's easy, and it will guarantee that you have a fully coordinated set with very little effort. As we start talking about our sheet set and sheet composition, of course, one of the first questions you might have is, how do I create a sheet? Well, this file that we started with was based on the default template, and the default template includes many sheets for us to get started with, and many of those sheets even already have views inserted on them. So that's a big help, and that will certainly help you get started, but the chances that every sheet that you need and all the views on those sheets will already be set up in a template is pretty slim, so you're definitely going to need to create some sheets of your own and adjust the setup of those sheets for sure. So one of the easiest ways we could do that is to simply right-click the Sheets branch and choose New Sheet. Now, there's also a button for it on the View tab if you prefer. In the Imperial file, I'm going to select the E1 title block in this dialog that appears. In the Metric file, it's A0, but there's also a cover, so make sure you're choosing the A0, not the cover, the one that's the standard title block. Now, if you don't see the title block you want, there is a load button, so you could browse out and load a title block family. Click OK, and that's really all there is to it. That will create a new empty sheet ready for you to populate with views. Now, I'm going to scroll down a little on the browser here, and the name may be a little puzzling. Like, why did it do C102? Well, just remember the way that Revit numbers anything that it auto numbers. It simply remembers where it left off and picks up from there the next time you run the command. So in this case, the last sheet that was created in this project was C101, and so it just picked up from there and gave us C102. Well, you can rename or renumber the sheet in one of two ways. Right-click it and go to Rename, and that will display this dialog. You can put in a different number, so I'm going to put in A107 there, and for now I'm just going to do a temporary name like New Sheet. We're going to change that in just a moment. Notice that it disappears from here, and that's because I changed it to an A1 series, and so it will jump up in the list to the appropriate location based on the number. So by default, your sheet list is going to sort in alphanumeric order. Now, the other way that you could rename or renumber the sheet is directly on the title block. So if you select the title block and then click right on one of the labels, that will activate it, and we can change the name from New Sheet, which was just a placeholder, to something more appropriate like Furniture Plans. Now, the number I put in wrong as well. I put in 107, but I meant to put in 701. So I'm going to type A701. And as soon as I enter that, watch the project browser. It will leave that spot. And then if we scroll down, it now occurs after A601. So again, it's going to resort based on the values you put in. And notice, of course, that it now says Furniture Plans here as well. So feel free to edit the name and number using either method. It doesn't make a difference because they're both doing the same thing. Now, Furniture Plans is unique to this sheet, as is 701. The author field is unique to this sheet. So I can put in my initials. I can put in the initials of whoever's going to check this. Those are all sheet-specific values. If I go to some other sheet, notice that the author and checker are unchanged here. However, if I go back to the Furniture Plans here, if I were to change Office Park or Headquarters or the project number or the project date, any of those values are global and would affect all the sheets. So if we change the date from 515 to 520 and enter that, then we come over here, it's set to 520 in this window as well. Now, the other place where we can do this, we've already seen earlier in the course. If I go back to Manage and project information, you may recall that this is the dialog we use to fill in this information in the first place. And so there's the date right there, and I could change it again. So let's change it to June 20, and you could change any of the other values if you wish. And when I click OK, the date changes here, and it changes here. And in fact, if you open up any of the other sheets, you'll see it change in those locations as well. All right, so I'm going to click back to the furniture plans and zoom out. And all that really remains now is to take this empty sheet and put a view on it. And that's as simple as drag and drop. Now, on the project browser, you can tell when a sheet is empty because there will be no plus or minus sign next to its name. So this sheet has views on it. This one, and this one do not. Okay, so let's scroll up here on the project browser. Let's locate our level 1 architectural furniture plan, drag it, drop it, and place it somewhere on the sheet. And that's really all there is to it. So if you need to add a sheet to your set, it's a very simple process to do. And then you just drag and drop views to populate that sheet. Sometimes you will want to revisit the composition of a sheet and make adjustments. So in this video, I'm thinking about this furniture plan that we set up, and I'm thinking there's an awful lot of extra unused white space around the plan, and I'd like to try and fit both the first and second floor furniture plans on the same sheet. So to do that, I'm going to need to adjust the size of this viewport so that it's cropped closer to the building geometry for both of the furniture plans, and then I should be able to fit them here together. Let's go ahead and look at that process. I'm going to do this work directly in the sheet here, and what you can do is actually double click right inside this viewport to activate that view while the sheet is still visible. So that can sometimes be a handy way to work so that you can kind of use the sheet as reference. Now, we've got this crop region out here, and you may recall that that crop region is being controlled by a scope box. So if I scroll down to the extents area, the scope box right here is currently assigned to views overall. You have two ways that you can adjust the cropping of this view. You can either set this to none, which exposes the little grip controls here, and then you can simply begin adjusting this manually. That would be fine if you only had one or two views to do. But if you have lots of views to do and you want them to be coordinated, it might be nicer to create another scope box. So that's the method that I'm going to do instead. And to do that, I'm going to come over here to the View tab, and the scope box tool is right here. Now, to draw a scope box, it's as simple as clicking the tool and then just dragging out a rectangle. So I'm going to start right about here and then drag out a rectangle that's a nice close crop to the shape of the building. With that scope box selected, I can come over here to the properties and change its name. So it defaults to Scope Box 3, but I would rather it be called Furniture and Power Plans. And that's because I'm going to use that scope box for both the furniture and the power plans, so I'm naming it accordingly. So now I'm going to deselect the scope box. That gets me back to the properties of the furniture plan. I'll scroll back down to the extents area, and now we'll take the scope box, which is currently set to none, and we'll change that to our newly created furniture and power plans, and you'll now see it come in and crop closely around the building. Now, this next step is very important. You might be tempted to just come over here and grab this and drag it, but that would actually change the cropping of the view. You don't want to do that. You're still in an active viewport. You need to double click outside of that view to deactivate the viewport. Notice that the sheet comes back to full intensity. That's how you know that it's safe to drag this now. Now you can grab this viewport and drag it and place it where you want it to go. And you can use the arrows on your keyboard to fine-tune the position. So I'm snugging that up in the upper left-hand corner. That looks pretty good. Now, notice that the title bar went along for the ride. In addition, there's a little grip control here, and you can drag that title bar to make it a little bit shorter. But if you want to move that title bar independently of the viewport, you need to first deselect, then click right on the title bar and drag it, and notice that you can move it separately from its viewport. So It's pretty important that you understand that, because otherwise you'll try and drag the title bar and it'll move the viewport too. Okay. All right. So now I've got the first floor set up. The second floor furniture plan is here on the project browser, and I don't even need to open it to do the next step. I can simply select it right here on the browser. That gives me access to its properties at the top here. I will scroll down and locate its scope box feature. It's currently set to views overall. That's the large one. I'm going to just simply change that to furniture and power plans, and that's all I need to do. Now I can drag and drop this into the view window, and you can see it's using the smaller sized scope box. Now, remember that if you kind of move around here, it will try to sense where the building geometry is, and it's going to line this up perfectly. So make sure that you're lining it up with the first floor, and then click. And now you can see that the second floor has come in here and it's lined up perfectly with the first floor. I will click away from it to deselect. I'll grab the title bar independently, drag it to this location, and notice that it senses where the other title bar is. I'll let go. Then I'll come back and click the viewport to get to this grip again and drag it until it senses where the other one is and let go. And now that completes our setup. Now, I am going to do one last thing here. Notice that these views are showing that red dashed section. So we talked about that in an earlier video, but I'm going to remind you of where that is right here. Now, both of these furniture plans are using a view template to control their visibility. So I'm going to go to the view templates dropdown, choose manage view templates, scroll down and locate the furniture plan view template, and then edit the filters. Now, you may recall from an earlier video that views working is controlling that visibility of those temporary sections, and I can simply hide them by unchecking visibility, click OK a few times, and that completes the setup of our furniture plan sheet, now with its much closer cropping. Going through all the steps to manually set up a sheet and configure its views can be time consuming. So in this video, I want to show you a couple techniques where you can use the duplicate sheet functionality to speed that process up. So in the first scenario, I want to create a new sheet for the power plans, and I want to configure them exactly the way that the furniture plans are configured with both floors on the same sheet. So let's look at that example first, and then we'll move on to a second example where we will create a new second floor plan sheet. So I'm going to scroll down here on the project browser and locate the A701 furniture plans sheet. And what you do is you just simply right click it, and there's a duplicate sheet option right here. Now, there's a few choices here, but honestly, the one that I want to show you is duplicate with views. That's the one that's really powerful. Duplicate empty sheet is not much different than creating a new sheet. And duplicate with sheet detailing only applies if you actually have detailing on your sheet, like general notes or something like that. So I'm going to choose duplicate with views. And then it will offer me this dialog to give me 3 ways to duplicate the nested views. So it recognizes that there are 2 viewports on this sheet, and it's going to duplicate both of those as well. Now, since there are room labels in the floor plans, and I think it might be nice to have those room labels on the power plans too, I'm going to choose the second option to duplicate with detailing. That creates a new sheet over here with the suffix copy1 and 2 nested views that also have copy1 at the ends of their names. So I'm going to right click the A702 furniture plans copy1 and choose rename. That puts me in this dialog. I'm going to change the number to 801 and remove copy1 from the name and instead put in power plans. So that renames the sheet, but now what about these nested views? Well, at the moment, these nested views are exact copies of the furniture plans. So what I'm going to do is perhaps a little bit surprising, but I'm going to scroll up to the top of the list here, back to my floor plans, and I'm going to take my original power plans and delete them. Now, at first you may be thinking, that's surprising. Why would you do that? Well, you can only get away with this technique if your power plans or whatever view you're deleting doesn't have a lot of view specific elements to it that you want to preserve. So in this case, the only real difference between the power plans and the furniture plans are the view template that was assigned to them. So I can easily recreate this power plan by just reusing that existing power plan view template. So what I'm going to do is select L1 architectural power and hold the control key down, and L2 architectural power, press the delete key, and that removes both of those views. Now I'm going to come back to the same location here where we see L1 architectural furniture copy 1, and I'm going to right click that and choose rename, and I'm going to press the N key to go to the end of the name and backspace out all of this and change it to power. And then I'll repeat that for this one, rename, go to the end, backspace out all of this and change it to power. So going back down to the bottom of the window here now, you can see that we have power plan and power plan inserted on this A801 sheet. However, they still look like furniture plans to me. Well, now all we need to do is select the L1 power plan, hold the control key, and the L2 power plan. Come up here to the properties. It says views 2, so we've got them both selected. We're going to scroll down to the view template option. It's currently assigned to the furniture plan. We're going to click that button and assign it to the typical power plan instead. Click OK, and that's all there is to it. Now, both of those views look like power plans instead of furniture plans. Now, as I said, if you had a bunch of view-specific detailing on those power plans, that technique would not work, okay? Because when we delete the views, we would lose all that detailing. So let's look at a second scenario that has to do with the floor plans, the main architectural floor plans. Here's our L1 architectural floor plan. It's got lots of tags and dimensions. Here's our L2 architectural floor plan. It also has lots of tags and dimensions, but they're different than the ones on L1. So that technique wouldn't work here if we wanted to create an L2 sheet from an L1 sheet. So we're going to approach it a little bit differently in this case. So I'm going to close both of these views. And then I'm going to scroll down, and on the project browser under Sheets, you may notice that I've removed the A102 sheet from the sheet set. We're going to recreate it now from the A101 sheet. So right-click A101, go to Duplicate Sheet, and you want to choose Duplicate with Views again. Same command we just did a moment ago. It doesn't matter what you choose this time, because the view that we're going to create is just going to be a placeholder, and we're going to get rid of it when we're done. I'm just going to choose duplicate. This is a copy of level 1 without any detailing right now. Now I'm going to right click A102 and choose rename. I'm going to remove copy 1 from the name and accept architectural floor plans, and the number A102 is fine. So now here's what we're going to do differently. Rather than try to make this copied floor plan look like level 2, I'm going to swap out this viewport with my existing level 2 floor plan that's already part of my project. And the way that we do that is to simply select the viewport, and then up here on the ribbon, we can choose a different view to put in its place. Now, you can do that either from the viewport center or the viewport origin. In my experience, viewport origin tends to work better for floor plans, so I'm going to choose that. Then I'm going to open up this list, choose the floor plan L2 architectural, and that is all there is to it. Now this sheet, this newly duplicated sheet, is using our existing L2 floor plan as is with all its detailing intact, and it's just matching the configuration of the existing L1 sheet that it was based on. So those two sheets are the same configuration as one another, and I was just able to do that a lot more quickly. So as you're building out a robust sheet set, especially on projects that have lots of floors, I think either one of those two techniques will greatly speed up the process of creating the various sheets that will be required in typical projects. In this video, I want to show you a neat feature that schedules have when you place them on sheets. There's an option called Filter by Sheet. And with this option, we can break up a large schedule into pieces that pertain to whatever is shown in the sheet that it's on. That may be a little confusing, so let me just demonstrate. I think that'll be easier. So what I'm going to do is I've got this first floor plan right here, A101 architectural floor plans. It has a single viewport for the first floor. Then I'm going to scroll down to the Sheets branch on my project browser, locate the second floor plan, double click to open that up, and this has a single viewport for the second floor. So my goal is I want to take the door schedule, which is currently on the A601 sheet. So let's double click that, and it's right here in the upper corner. So let me zoom in here. This door schedule is showing all the doors in the building, the ones on the first floor and the ones on the second floor. Now you can see that if you look over in the hardware column over here, notice that this batch of doors begins with number 1. Those are the ones on the first floor. And this batch begins with number 2. Those are the ones on the second floor. So our goal is to place this door schedule on the other 2 sheets, 101 and 102, and separate it out into 2 pieces that are grouped based on the levels that they pertain to. That allows us to take advantage of a unique feature of schedules. Schedules can appear on more than one sheet. Graphical views cannot. What I want to show you is that if we go back to one of our floor plans here, scroll up to the top of the list, take any other floor plan or view that has a little blue badge next to it, start to drag it and drop it on this A101 floor plan, it's going to tell you that that view is already placed on another view and that you can't place it again here, and it'll give you some options like duplicating and so on. I'm just going to close that because I don't actually want to go through with that. Schedules do not have that limitation. Schedules can be placed on multiple sheets at the same time. So that means we could leave the schedule here on the A601 sheet if we wanted to and place it on 101 and 102, but I don't think we need it here on 601 anymore. So I'm going to select it on 601, press the delete key. That does not delete the schedule. That just simply removes it from the sheet. So if we scroll down here on the project browser, what that does is the schedule is still here, but notice that the badge is not blue anymore. Okay. So before I deleted it, the badge was blue like the room schedule and the sheet list, but now it is white. Okay. So we've simply removed it from the sheet. So let's close A601. And now what I want to do is I've got 101 open here. I'm going to take this door schedule, drag and drop it, and I'm just going to kind of place it here beneath the floor plan on the 101 sheet. I mentioned that we can have it on more than one sheet at the same time. So I'm going to keep it selected. I'm going to copy it to my clipboard, click over here to the 102 sheet, paste, drop down, and align to current view. And I've just placed another copy in exactly the same spot. Okay, so I now have the same schedule on both sheets, but now I want to filter them by sheet. So that's the feature that we wanted to talk about here. So you want to do this next thing carefully. You can edit the door schedule by double clicking on it, but you want to be careful that you don't double click next to it. You know, if you're trying to get the schedule and then you accidentally do this, it's going to activate the floor plan because we placed this schedule on top of the floor plan. So if that happens, just double click next to the floor plan to get out of there and then try again by going right to the schedule and just try double clicking it on the edge of some of the line work. And that usually works. And that's going to open up that schedule. Okay. So now with the schedule open, we can scroll down here on the properties palette. And next to filter, we're going to click this edit button. And all we need to do is check this box. Click OK. Nothing changes here in the door schedule itself. But if you close it and now look at the sheets, you can see very clearly here on our second floor sheet that it's much shorter. And notice over here in the hardware column that it's only showing us doors that are on the second floor. And then if we consider the first floor, we'll see the same thing, but the list is a little longer because there's more doors on the first floor. And that's it. That's the filter by sheet functionality. Now, this is a simple example because it's just a small 2-story building. But if you have a multi-story building, you can make use of this feature for any kind of schedule. It doesn't have to be a door schedule. So anytime you want to break up a schedule across multiple sheets based on the elements that are shown in the viewports, you can use that feature. In this video, I want to talk about the guide grid feature. Now, the guide grid feature is designed for one purpose. It allows you to line up viewports on one sheet with the similar viewports on another sheet. So a really common example of when you might want to use this is for floor plans, where you have multiple floor plan sheets and you want the floor plans on each sheet to be in the same relative position relative to the title block, right? So the guide grid can help you do that. I've got this blank sheet here called Reflected Ceiling Plans, and the first thing I need to do is put some views on it. So I'm going to scroll down here to the Ceiling Plans branch, and it turns out you can actually drag and drop more than one view at the same time. So I'm going to use my Control key and select both L1 and L2 ceiling plans, drag and drop, and then you'll see it places them kind of side by side, and you just simply click somewhere to place them. Now, it did its best to guess a good configuration. Naturally, I'm going to need to move these around because they don't fit the title block. But what I'd like them to do is to match other similar sheets that I have here in the set. So if I scroll down, you can open up either A701 furniture plans or 801 power plans. They're both set up the same way. And I'd like it to match this configuration. So we're going to create a guide grid from this sheet and then apply that to the reflected ceiling plan sheet. So to do that, we're going to go to the View tab. And on the Sheet Composition panel, there's a guide grid tool right here. Just simply click that and then give it a name. And I'll call this Plan Sheets. And I'll click OK. Now you get this really dense blue graph paper that appears covering the whole sheet. And it can be a little distracting at first, but we're going to adjust that in just a moment. Now, the way the guide grid works, the concept is you can snap your viewports to intersections of the grid. And specifically, you can snap datum elements in your viewports. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a measurement. Let's come over here to the Measure Between Two References tool, this little tape measure icon. And I'd like you to move your mouse around. Well, first of all, let's move around in the grid here and notice that it will highlight any of the grid intersections on this dense blue graph paper. But also notice that it will sense where your grid lines are, where reference planes are, or where levels are. Now, we're looking at floor plans, so we don't see any levels. So in this case, we can snap to either grid intersections or reference plane intersections. So what I'd like to do is take the measurement from the intersection at A4 at the top of the plan down to the intersection at A4 at the lower version of this. So in this Imperial file, the distance that I got was 1 foot 3 inches or 15 inches. In the metric file, that distance is 375 millimeters. So just jot that down somewhere. So now what I'm going to do is go to the Modify tool to cancel out of there, move my mouse over here to the guide grid, select it, and notice over here on the Properties palette, you can change the grid spacing. So instead of the default, which is this very dense blue grid, I'm going to increase that to the measurement that we just took. So here in Imperial, that's 15 inches. If you're working in metric, it's 375 millimeters. And when you apply that, your guide grid is now much bigger and certainly much less distracting. That's honestly all you really need to do, but I also like to take these grips here and resize it. I don't think I need it to be quite as large as it is, so I usually like to stretch that down. Now, you do need to be able to see at least one full square, so I'm going to stretch it down so that I can see just one square, and then I'm going to go to the Move command, and I'm just going to move it over here so we can see that better. That intersection right there, I want to line up with grid A4 over here, and this one will automatically line up here because we got the spacing correct. So let me show you. So we're going to snap right to there, and then notice that we can reach in there and snap right to the intersection here. And if you take a look here, notice that it perfectly lines up with A4 in both directions because we established that measurement. So we've now established our guide grid at the spacing and location that we want. Now, sometimes it's a little tricky to select here with the viewports on top of it. So I'm going to tab in, and if you like, you can stretch the width over just to make it easier so that it's selectable off to the side here. All we need to do now is go to our reflected ceiling plans sheet, scroll down on its properties, and at the very bottom is a guide grid property. Change that to plan sheets. And notice that that blue graph will now appear on this sheet as well in exactly the same location. So now you simply click on the first floor viewport, go to the Move tool, snap right to the intersection of grid A4, and snap that right to that intersection on the grid. If you're having any trouble getting it to snap to the intersection, you can type SI, which is the keyboard shortcut for snap to intersection. And notice I'm able to move both of those viewports to the appropriate locations. And then as a finishing touch, you can move and adjust the title bars. And of course, pay attention to the alignments so that they line up with one another. And that completes the setup of our ceiling plan sheet. You don't need to hide the guide grid, but you can if you want to. It won't print, but if you want to, you can set it to none and it will disappear if you no longer want to see it. In this video, we're going to talk about two special kinds of schedules, a sheet list and a view list. Now, if you think all the way back to the earliest part of the course where we created a new project from the built-in template, that built-in template contained a cover sheet, which I'm looking at now, and it also contained a sheet list schedule. Now, that sheet list is already placed here on this cover sheet. So if I zoom in here, you're going to see that we've got a nice list here of all the sheets that are contained on our Sheets branch down here. So you can see each of the sheets that is in the set is listed there in that list. So if I scroll up to the Schedules branch here and expand it, this is a sheet index schedule. So all a sheet index is just a schedule that is listing the sheets that are in your project instead of model geometry. Now, if you needed to create one of these from scratch, you could right click and it's got its own command here, new sheet list. But since it already exists in the project, there's no need for us to do that. But I just wanted to show you how you can do that in projects that don't already contain one. And then in the dialog that appears, it'll be just like creating any other schedule. You're just going to add the fields that you want to add. So for example, let's say that we wanted to customize this one. Okay, so rather than building a new one from scratch, we'll just customize the one that's here. Maybe I want to add the sheet issue date or who drew the sheet to this index. Well, I first need to get to that view. So I could double click it here on the project browser, or you could just double click it right here on the sheet. Either way, that puts you in that schedule, and it's just like any other schedule now. And if you look over here on the properties palette, you can edit the fields right here. So let's say I want to add the sheet issue date, and then maybe I want to add who drew the sheet as well. And let's put the drawn by first and then the issue date last. And then it might look something like that. Okay. Now, if we click back to the cover sheet, you can see that this has already captured those adjustments, and you're seeing that information here. So like any other schedule, this is live data and you could edit this. So I could use this as a way of editing who drew individual sheets. Okay. Now, one thing you're noticing here is it doesn't fit anymore. Notice that it's kind of hanging off the edge of my title block here. Okay, so we certainly have some room elsewhere. So one option would be to move this sheet index someplace else. But if we wanted to keep it where it is here, I could maybe slide it over a little like so, but I'd want to adjust some of those columns. So there's two ways to do that. You can do it directly in the schedule by dragging between two columns there. But you'll notice here when it's selected on the sheet that you also have these little triangles up here, and that allows you to do essentially the same thing. So maybe the sheet number doesn't need quite so much room, so I can make that narrower, but then it compresses the header in kind of a strange way. Well, just come back here and you don't have to put the full property name, sheet number, you can actually edit that text and abbreviate it. So I'm just going to put NO period. Now that makes that a little bit easier to read. Likewise, sheet issue date doesn't need to be written out entirely. I could just remove the word sheet and it could just say issue date. And then when we click over here, that's going to fit maybe a little bit more comfortably. And then if you decide to drag that a little bit narrower like so, now we finally have the index fitting more comfortably in the available space. Now, if you don't like just dragging these columns, you can actually set those numerically if you prefer. So you would do that by selecting the column in the schedule here and clicking the resize button, and then you can type it in numerically. So here in the Imperial file, if I wanted the sheet name to be exactly 3 inches wide, I could type that in. That's about 75 millimeters in metric, and that will give me a little bit more room to work with as well. Okay, so feel free to make any other graphical adjustments that you'd like to. It is a schedule like any other. Now, the next thing I want to point out is how the schedule is formatted. If you look at the Sheets branch, you can see that my Sheets branch starts with sheet A101, and then the cover is unfortunately at the bottom because the number of this cover sheet is G101. Okay. Now, when I look at the sheet index, it's a little strange because, well, I've got this group called General, and the cover is at the top of that. Then I have Civil, the site plan. Then I have Architectural and all the architecturals. But then I've got these 3 other views that are just kind of up at the top sort of randomly. So what's happening there? Well, it turns out that there are some hidden fields in this schedule that are sorting and grouping it differently than what we see on the project browser. Okay, the project browser is just doing it alphanumerically, and you don't have any control over that. But on the sheet index, you do. So I'm going to scroll back up and look at the schedules branch, and the sheet index is under schedules typical, but there's also a branch called schedule working, and there are 2 items in there. So I'm going to double click the working sheet list, and this one displays the hidden fields. And now you can start to understand why the 3 sheets that we've added in some of the earlier videos here are not in the correct location on the list. There is a parameter here in column C called sheet sort, and that's just a number, but that is what's determining how to sort this schedule, not the sheet number itself. And then the sheet group is what creates these headings here, General and Architectural. So what we can do is edit this directly, and I can choose from the existing list here, and I'm going to choose Architectural for each of those 3 sheets that were created in earlier videos. And then all of those are A sheets, so they should all use this same sheet sort of 070. You can just type it in, or you should be able to just pull it from the list as well because it's been used previously. And now when I go back to the cover, notice that it has resorted everything correctly. Okay. So the working sheet list is just used for ensuring that your sheet index is in the correct order by assigning these additional hidden properties correctly to each of the sheets. So just try and remember that that's something that you'll want to do when working on your sheet list. Now, in addition to that, there is a working view list, and I just wanted to point this out briefly. I'm not going to really get into this in any kind of detail, but a view list is yet another kind of schedule. So right click and view list, and this is a schedule of all of the views in the project. And what could be useful about this is it allows you a kind of one-stop place where you can go in and check the settings of different views and then even make changes to them if they need to be changed. It includes things like the scope box that's assigned, the view template that's assigned. So if we realize that something should have a different view template, we can choose it here. If we realize something should have a different scope box, we can change it here. If you want to change the name of a sheet, you can change it here. So there's a lot of different settings that you can manipulate right here, and that can usually be a little bit quicker to work in that schedule than it would be to do it here on the project browser. So it just offers you another opportunity to do that. The two kind of go hand in hand because your views are placed on your sheets and then your sheets appear on the sheet index. So you might want to consult both of those working views and get everything in order there. And then when you do, you should have a sheet index that is correctly formatted in the right order and represents all of the sheets in your document set.
In this video, I'd like to talk to you about sheet collections. Sheet collections is a feature that allows you to set up multiple groups of sheets that behave independently. So typically, you're only able to use a sheet number once, and once you've used that sheet number, you can't repeat it. Revit wouldn't allow for that. But if you set up more than one sheet collection, you can. So within each sheet collection, you can repeat a numbering scheme over again. You still can't have duplicate numbers within the collection, but in the other collections, you can have duplicate numbers. So to demonstrate this feature, I'm going to work in the Snowden Towers sample architectural model that comes with the software. We last looked at this way back in chapter 1. So to remind you how to get there, I'm here on the home screen and I'm going to click the back button or Control D and then go to the file menu and hover over open. Don't click it. That will expand the open menu here. Then I'm going to come down to the bottom and choose sample files. And in this folder that appears, I will choose Snowden Towers Sample Architectural and click open. Now, if you're a Revit LT user, you won't be able to open this directly using this method. You will have to first go out to the Autodesk website, download a copy of the Snowden Towers sample project, save it somewhere in your local hard drive and open it from there. Okay. Revit LT does not include this sample model. Now, when the file opens, it will most likely open read-only. It's perfectly fine. Just click continue opening the file right here, and then we can begin. So what I want to do is come over here to the project browser, scroll down, and locate the Sheets branch right there. So to create a new sheet collection is as simple as right-clicking and choosing New Sheet Collection, and then you can right-click and rename it and give it a name. So in this example, I'm going to create a separate collection for schematic design and construction documents. Now, another way that you can change the name is right here. And of course, you can use that to fix typos as well. All right, so I now have my two sheet collections. Now we're going to add some sheets to them. And the simplest way to do that is to simply grab a sheet and drag and drop it into the desired collection. Now, you can do that with a multiple selection as well. So I could select sheet A101, scroll down, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the cover sheet, hold my shift key down, click. That will select all the sheets in between. And you look up here on the properties palette, you can see that's a total of 38 sheets. Scroll back up, and I'll drag that entire collection into the construction documents sheet collection. All right, so now you can collapse these to get them out of the way temporarily. So let me just collapse the construction documents group there, and that leaves me with my schematic design. I'll scroll down now and locate my SD sheets. You can see they're currently named with SD prefixes. We're going to change that shortly, but for the time being, I'm going to select all of them. There are 7. And as an alternative to move them to the desired sheet collection, you can also do that up here on the properties palette. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. Both achieve the same thing. And now you'll notice that all of my SD sheets are in the schematic design sheet collection. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is sheet indices. So we've got a cover sheet open here. And if we zoom in over here on the right, you can see that sheet index over here on the cover sheet. And if you look at it carefully, you'll notice that it does not contain any of the SD sheets. Now, to achieve that, it's leveraging a feature called Include on Sheet Index. So I've still got the 7 schematic design sheets selected. I'm going to scroll down here on Properties. And notice that there's this Appears in Sheet List property here. It's currently unchecked. So regardless of whether you have these in sheet collections or not, if you have this box unchecked, these sheets will not appear on a sheet index at all. So what I want to do is turn that back on so that these sheets can appear on a sheet index. Now that will add them to this sheet index, which is not really what I want. Notice that the sheet index is now running off the page there and the schematic design sheets are at the top. But we'll fix that in just a moment. Okay, so that's just the first step. So now the SD sheets can be included on any sheet index. So now we're going to address the sheet index issue. So let's come up here to the schedules and quantities branch. There are 2 sub branches. Let's start with the working schedule, scroll down, and there's a working view, WView sheet list right here. Let's double click and open that up. So one of the things about sheet collections is that field is also available to your schedules. So if we scroll down here and locate the Edit Fields button, click it, scroll down in here, there's sheet collection, and I can add that to the schedule, click OK, and I now have this column over here on the right, which contains the sheet collection. And you could actually use this to edit that value. So that's another way that you could assign sheets to a sheet collection if you wish. All right, so this working sheet list, we could do any of the normal things with it. We could use it to group sheets, sort sheets, rename them, adjust them. That's all I wanted to show you in the working sheet list, is that we can add that field to the list. So let's close this one, and instead let's open up the one that's here on the cover sheet. Now you could do that by double clicking it right here on the cover sheet. That will open it up, but it's also located here under typical schedules and right there, sheet index. So open it either way. So if you like, you can zoom in on it by holding the control key down and rolling the wheel. And what we want to do here is add that sheet collection to this index now, and we're going to use this as the filtering mechanism instead of that checkbox that we disabled a few moments ago. So how do we do that? Well, let's first add the field. So we're going to go to Edit Fields. And what I want to point out here is that there are only 2 fields visible, but there are actually 4 fields currently in the schedule. Okay, so 2 of these are being hidden: sheet sort and sheet group. So we're going to set up our sheet collection the same way. So I'm going to add that to the schedule, make sure it's at the bottom. And if I were to click OK right here, you'll see it appear as column C. I don't want column C to show up, the sheet collection to show up on my cover sheet. So I want it to be hidden like the other ones are. So if we go to formatting, we can select sheet collection and make it a hidden field. And that's how sheet group and sheet sort was set up as well. So when I click OK, now it hides that field, but it's still there. And the reason that we want it to be there is because what we want to do now is go to the Filter tab, click Edit, and now we're able to filter on sheet collection. Okay, so I'm going to go to sheet collection here, equals schematic design, and click OK. So notice that that shortens my sheet index to only include the schematic design sheets now. Trouble is, this is my construction documents cover sheet. It's not my schematic design cover sheet. So what I'm going to do here is right click and duplicate the sheet index. I will right click the copy and rename it. And I'm going to remove copy 1 and add SD to the end of the name. Then I'm going to leave this one just the way it is. We're already filtering out to just schematic design. But I'm going to go back to the original one here and go to filter. And instead of saying it equals schematic design, I will just simply say it does not equal schematic design. So by saying does not equal schematic design, it can equal anything else. None, construction documents, whatever is set there. And then finally, my cover sheet now is back to normal. Okay, so that takes care of that. But really, let's talk about the final thing, which is the main reason why we were doing sheet collections in the first place. If you try to reuse the same sheet number more than once within your project, it generates an error. So for example, if I said SD 101 for this second floor plan, it will generate this warning saying, this is already in use. Okay, so you're not allowed to do that. Now, back here, I already have sheets A100, A101, A102, but that's in a different sheet collection. That means that I'm able, with no error here, change the numbers of all of these SD sheets to A series, assuming that that's what I wanted to do. And that really is the main reason and the main benefit to using sheet collection. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, where you'd like to have 2 groups of sheets that use the same numbering scheme for whatever purpose, then sheet collections is the tool that you want to explore. In this video, I want to talk about a fairly simple feature. It's placeholder sheets. So if you are tasked with creating a large collection of sheets, then sometimes using placeholders can be a more convenient approach. Now, there's lots of ways to create sheets. This is not the only way, but I thought I would go through the process with you just in case it was something that was unfamiliar to you. So what is a placeholder sheet? Well, it's quite frankly you planning ahead for what sheets you think will be needed in your project. So you can do this from the very beginning. When a project just gets started, you can kind of make some assumptions. I'm going to need a certain number of floor plans, a certain number of elevations and schedules and so on. And you can kind of build out those sheets ahead of time, even before you've actually added them to the sheet set. Okay, so let me show you what I mean here. This particular project that I'm in has only a single sheet, this cover sheet that we're looking at right now. And if we scroll down on the project browser to the Sheets branch, you can see that, right? See how cover G101 is the only sheet available in this project. Okay, well, you certainly could right-click and create a new sheet, and that would create them one at a time. But if you set up some placeholder sheets first, then you can speed this process up a little bit and maybe also introduce a little bit more consistency in the way that you create them. So you do that in a sheet list. Now you'll notice that here that this cover sheet does have a sheet list. And of course, right now, it's a list of one item, right? There's only the cover sheet. Now, to get to the sheet list, you can double click it and that will open it up. And you can hold the control key down and roll the wheel to zoom in, and we're seeing that same cover sheet information. Now, we could certainly work here, but notice that this project also has a working sheet list. So I think it actually might be more convenient to set up the placeholder sheets in a working view instead. So I'm going to double click that working sheet list, and let's zoom that in a little bit. And there's a few additional fields available here, which might make it a little bit more convenient to work here. It's up to you. You can do the next step that I'm going to show you in either sheet list, in any sheet list, really. So it doesn't have to be a working view. I'm just thinking that for me, a working view makes a little more sense here. Now, what you're looking for is this Insert Data Row button right here up on the Modify tab of the ribbon. That's the key to creating a placeholder sheet. So when you do that, you're inserting a blank line in the schedule, but you have not yet created a sheet for it. So notice that I just created a placeholder called A108 unnamed, but I don't yet have a sheet called A108 unnamed. And that's really the key. Now, remember how Revit numbers things? When it auto numbers, it just picks up where it left off and it kind of numbers from there. So it is a pretty good idea to check this numbering and make sure it matches what you want before you click Insert Data Row again. So I'm going to make sure that this one is a good number, like A101. Then I'll tab over here and call this Floor Plans and enter that. Now, that's my first placeholder. When I click Insert Data Row again, notice that I'll get A102. It'll go back to unnamed. It doesn't do the naming for you, so we'll come back and do the naming later. So what I'd like to do right now is insert Data Row a number of times, down to when it gets me to 108, okay? I've got 3 floor plans on this project, plus a roof plan, so that's going to take me to 104. I've got 3 ceiling plans. That's going to take me to 107. So 108 is the first one that I want to renumber. So this is going to be A201. And then I'm going to insert Data Row again. And these are my elevation sheets. So I have north, south, east, west. I think I can fit maybe 2 per sheet. So 201, 202 should be enough, but you could do 203 if you want. So let's insert one more data row. And this is going to be 301. And that's going to be my first section sheet. Okay, so I've got a couple of those, and those will probably fit nicely on one sheet. And then let's just do maybe one more. Okay, so maybe something for the schedules. So A501. Okay, maybe you have some enlarged plans, maybe you have some detail sheets, so you can create as many of these placeholders as you like. Now, I am going to rename some of these. So this was roof plan, A104. A105 is reflected ceiling plan, and that's the next few. Then this was building elevations, This was building sections. And then this was schedules. So you notice how I'm typing in the values for the unique sheets. And that's because, like any schedule, once you've typed in a value, you can just choose it from the list the next time, or you could just begin typing. So I could either choose floor plans off the list here, or I could just start typing it and it would show up on the list. And so I'm able to reuse what I've previously typed a little bit more quickly. So that's why I just wanted to get the unique names in there first. Okay, so that is all of my placeholder sheets. Now, if I go back to my cover sheet, the cover sheet is already including the placeholders, even though I have not actually created any actual sheets from them yet. I still only have one sheet in the set. So if you do this in a project and you've got a cover sheet with an index on there already, you might want to think about that. Perhaps you remove the index until you're ready to actually create the sheets or something like that. Or you could hide them from the index. There's a number of things you could do. But what about the order of these? Okay, the A series are doing just fine because they're numbering alphabetically, but notice that the cover sheet is coming up at the bottom there, and it's got a heading of general, but none of the architectural sheets do. Well, that was the other reason I wanted to show you the working sheet list, because it's got these two fields called sheet sort and sheet group, okay? And so it turns out that you can put whatever value you want in here. So 00 was what was under the sheet sort for the cover, and that will force it first if I just put in a bigger number for the other ones. So 100, for example, for the floor plans. And then this can be architectural. Now, all of this could take some time to fill in all of these remaining ones, okay? But there is a little trick that you can do. If I duplicate this sheet list, this working sheet list, just temporarily, take columns A and B and remove them. Now I'm going to scroll down here, and under sorting and grouping, I'm going to turn off itemize every instance, and I get just 3 entries. This is one sheet, the general sheet. This is one sheet, the architectural sheet. This is everything else. So I could set all of those to 100 and all of these to architectural. And then when I close and in fact delete that temporary view list, you can see that back here in the working list, it filled in all of that information for all of the others. So don't be afraid to create a temporary schedule just for the purpose of data input and then just throw it away if it's no longer necessary. So meanwhile, back here on the cover sheet, now it looks a lot nicer because I have my general grouping, then my architectural grouping, and then everything is sorted accordingly. So that takes care of the sheet names and their sorting and the sheet index and all that great stuff. But what about the sheets, right? Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be talking about here? Well, that's the final step. So let's right-click the Sheets branch and choose New Sheet. And notice that all of the placeholder sheets appear down here at the bottom. Now, you can select one. You can hold the Control key down and select several. You could use the Shift key and pick a bunch, or you could literally drag through the whole list and select them all. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to select all of the sheets, click OK, and what I get is in a single step now, I have my complete set of sheets ready to go. Now, they are empty. You will still need to add views to the sheets. So there's one last thing I want to show you here as we wrap this up. So let me scroll back to the top, and I'm in the A101 sheet. That's my first floor plan. I'll drag and drop and place my floor plan where I want it to go. Down here at the bottom, notice that it says first floor architectural plan. Okay. The reason for that is, even though this is L1 architectural, is because each view also has a setting on the project browser called title on sheet. And notice that that was already filled in. Okay. So just like we had a working sheet list, we also have a working view list. So if we scroll down here on the browser, notice that there's a working view list right here. And if I double click and open that up, notice that title on sheet is available right there. And you can fill in that information for any of those views. So that means that the view called East Architectural is actually going to create a title, East Architectural Building Elevation. So if we open up that sheet and bring in the building elevation to this sheet and drag it on the view. Notice that the title says East Architectural Building Elevation. So that's already been done here in this file, but if you want to modify what any of those values say, I just wanted to point out to you that that was the title on sheet parameter. So feel free to go ahead and populate the rest of the sheets, but the next time you're faced with the daunting task of having to create dozens of sheets in a project, then perhaps you might want to consider using the placeholder sheet functionality. It might save you a little bit of time.
As you're working on your Revit project, it is possible that you might need to share your work with recipients who are not using Revit. Now, a common scenario might be that somebody on the project team needs AutoCAD files generated from your Revit model. So what I'd like to do in this video is walk through the process of exporting the views in your Revit model to the AutoCAD format. The process would be similar if you want to choose different formats. So Revit does actually support export to other formats as well. So let's go to the File menu here, and we're going to come down to this Export item. And if you hover over that, it will display a sub-menu, and this is where you can see the other formats that are supported. So we're going to be doing CAD formats and DWG for AutoCAD, but there is DXF and DGN. You can export PDFs, IFC files. So there's a number of choices available on this menu, but let's stick with DWG for this example, and that will display this window next. Now, there's an awful lot that we can configure in this window, so I'm going to kind of give you a high-level overview of it. But the first thing that you want to consider is what you're exporting. So right over here, there's an export dropdown, and it's defaulting to the current view or sheet only. And we're getting a preview of that here. So that would just be the cover sheet. If you click that, it's a menu, and you could choose all sheets, or you could choose this in session option, which would allow you to make a selection of sheets. Now, when you do that, the selection is just including the cover sheet. So you might be thinking, well, what's going on there? Well, that's simply because this second menu that appears says all views and sheets in the set. So the set is just simply those that are selected. So if I expand that, there are some other choices. And I can do this bottom choice here that says all views and sheets in the model. And now I get a comprehensive list. Okay, so that's the first hurdle to overcome, is getting to the list, right? Now we're going to do check none because I want to clear any selections. I don't actually want to export the cover sheet, but I'm going to export just a small selection of views instead. Let's do this 3D stair view right here. I think that'll be interesting. Let's scroll down and locate a floor plan sheet. So I'm going to take not the actual view, I want to find the sheet. So I'm going to keep scrolling until I see the sheets here. And there's sheet A101, architectural floor plans. I'll choose that. And let's do one more. Let's also do maybe some elevations. So it doesn't matter if I do 202 or 203, just pick one. And we'll just start with those three selections. Now, before I click next, let's consider the export setup. Now, it's possible you might have a list of choices here. I just have the one. To edit that setup, I click this browse button here, and that takes me to another very extensive dialog where you'll see lots of choices. Now, we're not going to go through everything in here because that would take quite a bit of time, but layers is somewhat important to your AutoCAD recipient, so let's spend a few moments talking about that. Now, everything's kind of compressed here, so what I'm going to do is stretch out a couple of these columns just so you can read things a little bit better. And let's consider just one of the entries on this list. So here there's an entry, casework. That is the Revit category called casework. What this is saying is when this exports to AutoCAD, it will convert elements that are on the casework category in Revit to the Q-case layer in AutoCAD and use color 31 to represent those elements. Now, I said convert because this is a destructive process. AutoCAD does not read Revit files. It can't just simply open a Revit file. It doesn't understand Revit geometry. So we need to take elements that are casework and essentially trace over them or convert them to just simple geometry like lines and planes and circles and things like that. So that's what I mean by convert. And it will draw those elements on the layer indicated here. Now, where did this list of layers come from? And it is a very long list, by the way, if you scroll through here. Okay. That came from the American Institute of Architects standard. That's what I'm using up here at the top. But notice there are some other international standards if you prefer. So that is up to you if you want to choose something else there. Now you could edit all the entries in here. You could type in your own layer names, your own colors. If you need to do that, then it will take some time. So make sure you set aside an appropriate amount of time to work on that. But I'm simply going to accept all of the defaults here using the AIA standard. Now, I could do similar things on the Lines tab, the Patterns tab, the Text tabs. And notice that in all these cases, it's generally defaulting to automatically generate the hatch pattern. So it's going to do kind of a direct mapping and create these things on the AutoCAD side. But you could do a hard mapping if you wish by choosing it from the menu. So again, lots of settings to consider, lots of things you could potentially configure. I'm going to accept all the defaults. I'm not going to change anything on colors. Now, I am exporting a 3D view in my selection. Remember, I chose the stair view. So here you get to decide what kind of 3D geometry should be created. It can either be a poly mesh or an ACES solid. I prefer solids, so that's what I'm going to choose. Units and coordinates. Make sure you understand what unit system your recipient wants to receive and choose appropriately. Now, if you're working in Imperial, AutoCAD typically defaults to inch, so that's what's chosen here. But if you're working in metric, you can choose millimeter or centimeter, whatever's appropriate. I do think in most cases, you'll want to change the coordinate base here to shared coordinates. This will make it easier for your recipient to XREF your files and have them line up properly, but you might want to have a conversation with them just to be sure. Okay, but at this point, I've made two changes in this dialog. I have changed it to ACES solids and shared coordinates. I left everything else at the default. The final thing I want to point out to you is here on the General tab. Make sure you have a conversation with your recipient and know which version of AutoCAD they're using. The latest version of AutoCAD is what I'm going to select here, but if for some reason your recipient is using an older version of AutoCAD, then it's important to know that before you export the file. Now, there's also this option here to export views on sheets and link them as external references. I think that is really powerful, and your AutoCAD recipient will appreciate that. So I usually leave that checked on. So let's click OK. I'm going to click Next here. And now it will want to know where I want to export these files to. I'm just going to put them on my desktop. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK here and accept the remaining defaults. Now, it might take a moment or two while it does the exporting. Now, when it's done, you will have a collection of AutoCAD files on your desktop or wherever you decided to place them in. I happen to have AutoCAD running here in the background. And what I'm going to do now is open up a couple of the resulting files and show you what they look like. So I'm going to use the open icon here, go to my desktop, and let's make this a little bit wider so that I can see the names here. And notice that several files were actually created. So we chose 3 items on the Revit side, but we got nearly 10 files here. So the 3D views are here, and then the sheet views are here. Now I want to focus on the sheet views in particular. This one right here, the A101, notice that that includes the title block and the views and so forth. So if I open this file, usually it comes in zoomed in really close. So in AutoCAD, to zoom to the extent of the file, you type the letter Z, enter it, and then you type the letter E, enter it, and that will do a zoom extents, which is the same as zoom to fit in Revit. So notice that it exported the title block, it exported viewports, and inside each viewport, it created the views that we placed on those sheets, okay? And in this case, you could see that I've got the floor plan, I've got my schedule, I've got a door legend, okay? So everything got exported here. Now, it might be easier to understand what we're looking at here if we open the floor plan directly. So if I go to open, that floor plan in the viewport is its own separate DWG right here, and I can open that up directly, and notice that now I can zoom in and see all of the geometry that was created. Now, it doesn't create walls. AutoCAD doesn't have walls. Instead, what I get is two separate lines here. Notice that the color of the lines and the interior are different than the color of the lines on the exterior. So it used different layers for the interior walls and the exterior walls. Remember that casework layer that we talked about? Well, here is a casework element, this countertop. And when I select that and right click and choose quick properties, you're going to see that it is on a layer called Q-case. So that it's the layer that Dialog told us it was going to be exported to. Now, some objects will get exported more as objects. AutoCAD calls those blocks. So typically that's going to be things like doors are going to be exported that way. But notice that this electrical symbol is actually just line work. It's just arcs and lines. So not every element will get exported as a block. So the goal is for it to be visually correct, but keep in mind that it's just geometry at this point. These are not elements in the sense of what they were in Revit. Now, the other thing that's really important to understand is this is a flat 2D drawing now. None of this is 3D geometry. Now, it is possible to export 3D geometry, and that's why I chose the 3D stair. So you have to explicitly choose a 3D view to export to get 3D geometry on the AutoCAD side, and then you can see that this is something that I can orbit. It is 3D geometry. If I select these, however, it's going to be things like body or a 3D solid. It's not going to come in as columns or floors. The AutoCAD recipient, if they need 3D geometry, you can send them something, but again, it's not a substitute for Revit. This gives you some idea of what is exportable from Revit. We're doing AutoCAD here, but other file formats are supported, so feel free to experiment with those if you wish. And one last point, just keep in mind that because we are doing an export here, it's not a live link. So if you need to make changes, you will need to re-export all of the geometry and send it to your recipient, and it will replace whatever they have on their end. So there's no way to keep these connected together with a link. It's going to be a separate export each time. In this video, I'm going to generate some output from my model. Now, I'm going to do it as a PDF, but it's also possible to print directly to your hard copy print device if you wish. You're going to find both options on the File menu. Under Print, you've got your print command here, print preview, print setup. So if you want to print directly to your printer, you can choose those options. If you want to generate a PDF first, which I think is a little more common these days, then that option is right here. It's also available under Export right here. And finally, it has a shortcut up here on the Quick Access toolbar. So any one of those would get you to the same place, this dialog right here. So let's go through some of these more common settings that are available here in this dialog. Current window at the top would just print what you see on screen. Okay, so that would just be this cover sheet in this case, which probably wouldn't be super useful to print by itself. Visible portion of the current window, I'd need to close this to kind of illustrate. I'm going to actually switch views here. I'm going to open up the L1 architectural plan, and I'm going to zoom in nice and close here on these items. And if we go back to export, visible portion of the current window would just do what you see on screen now. Okay, so instead of printing the entire view, it would just focus in on this area. So if there's some little portion of the view that you want to talk about and you want to just basically do a screen capture is what that amounts to. I think most of the time, selected views and sheets is going to be your likely option though, because this is going to allow you to either print all the sheets that are in the file or use this icon here to edit the list and choose a selection of sheets. So you can see that there's a selection of sheets already chosen here, but we can customize this should we need to. There's a display filter here, and you can actually include views as well as sheets, 2D and 3D. So it doesn't have to just be sheets. But in order to see the other options, I need to uncheck this Hide Unchecked Views and Sheets item here. And now you'll see these are all the ones that were checked, but notice that there are several other options available. So if I wanted to print this roof plan view along with the set, I could include it. It won't have a title block, but it will just print the roof plan as it stands. Okay. Now, if I scroll down a little further, there are some additional sheets in the list that weren't included in the original selection. So another way that you could deal with this list is to say, I'm only interested in sheets, but I want to see all of them without the other views in the way. So we're going to uncheck 2D views and 3D views. And now this only shows me the sheets. And then you could come in here and check any of the additional sheets that you wanted to include in this set. Now, once you've done that, you may notice that the order is not correct. Okay. So what I would like to do is take these newly added sheets 103 through 107 and move those up to after 102. So there's an edit print order button here. And then in this window, you can actually select with your shift key multiple sheets. So I'm going to select that whole collection there, drag it and drop it right there. And now I've reorganized the sheet list in my desired order. So now I'm going to click OK, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to select that, and you can actually save it too. So if you click Save, then this will become a new selection. And what it just did was it overwrote the previously saved version called All Sheets. Okay, so now I've just kind of overridden that. If you want to duplicate it first, there is a Save As up here. All right, so I'm going to click Select. So now my selection is the list called All Sheets. Okay, next, what do you want to call the file? I'll accept the default. Do you want to combine all the sheets together into a single PDF? Now that's my preference, but if you want a separate PDF for each sheet, you can uncheck that. Where do you want to save it? You can choose a page size, but I think most of the time you're just going to want to accept the use sheet size. So each sheet will tell the PDF how big it is, and it will use the correct size. I do think, however, you want to change the zoom to 100%. That's full size, right? Now, it is possible to change this. So if you want a half size set, you could do 50%, okay? But I want to do full size 100%. I'm going to center it. I'm going to accept all of these options here for high quality and vector processing. Some of your views will need to do raster processing, even though you choose vector processing. That's perfectly fine. Next, I want to talk about these settings down here at the bottom of the screen. Okay, some of these are kind of interesting. Since we're generating a PDF and it's in color, if you want, the view links can also be in color. So one example is this section head right here. So that means that that section head will be in color in the PDF print. If you uncheck that, it'll be black. Hide reference planes and work planes. We've got some examples here on screen. This dashed vertical line that runs through the elevation symbol, that is a reference plane. So if you have that checked, it will hide that element. Hide scope boxes. This dashed horizontal line on screen is a scope box. So if you have that checked, it will hide the scope box. I think that's a pretty good idea. Whether or not you have crop boundaries hidden in the views, you can hide them at the time of print. So I think that's also a pretty good idea. And then one of my favorite settings is this one right here. An unreferenced view tag is like this section mark right here. So it is unreferenced because it doesn't have a sheet number indication. The elevation symbol beneath it does. So the elevation is detail 1 on A202. That's a referenced view tag. It will print regardless, but the section marker that doesn't have a sheet reference, it'll actually hide that. So the idea is, if you're generating a set of documents, do you want to include section indicators for sections that don't appear anywhere in the set? Okay, that might confuse people. So that's a nice feature. Those are the settings that I want to do. Now all that remains for me to do is click Export. It's asking if I want to reuse these settings in the future and save it and give it a name. I can answer yes here, and I'll just change the 1 at the end and call this default and click OK. So that setup is now reusable. I can use that again the next time I export the PDF, and now we just have to wait for it to process the file. Now, you may recall that in the dialog, I mentioned raster and vector processing, and I said that some of the views would need to use raster processing regardless of what we chose there. That's what this message is telling me here. So it's telling me that raster processing was used for any views that had shading or shadows. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. You can just ignore that warning. I'm going to open that up. Let's maximize it. And as you can see, we're looking at the cover sheet initially. Now over here on the left, I'm going to click the page view, and this will show me the page thumbnails. And now you can see all of the sheets from this project have been saved together in a single PDF file. I can click on one of these floor plans as an example here. And remember that we had that option turned on to hide unreferenced view tags. Well, notice that my section cuts do not appear here because those were not on sheets. However, if you look at the 4 sides, you'll see that I do have 4 elevation indicators. Notice if you move your mouse near one of these elevation indicators, you should get a little pointer icon. I can click on that and it will jump right to that sheet. Okay, so one of the advantages of doing a multi-sheet PDF is it tries to maintain the links between them so that you can jump back and forth between those views. It also works here with the level heads. So I can jump back to the floor plan by clicking on one of those level heads. Now, one thing I noticed when looking at this is that I'm seeing the room separator lines. So even though we had checkboxes to hide reference planes, to hide scope boxes, to hide crop regions and unreferenced view tags, notice that things like room separation lines will be visible if they were showing on screen. So there is no setting that says hide room separation lines. So the only way you could hide these orange lines is to go back to Revit, hide that category, and regenerate the PDF. So if you want to try that or any other adjustments, feel free to do so, but you will need to generate the PDF over again if you make any changes to the Revit model.